All right, so yesterday I recorded this video, and I have to admit, I was a bit surprised and impressed that I managed to ramble on for an hour and 23 minutes. Sorry, my dog's barking as I started talking here. I was actually, I have a dog who is fair. She's scared of the heater turning on in October. And the last couple of days, she's been barking in the middle of the night as the heater turns on, and it's yeah, I guess it's like the we're thankful to have heat to keep us warm in the fall and the winter season, but my she is it's a difficult period of time when the heater turns on around this house. Anyways, I am recording this to talk about the ingress of Mercury into Scorpio, where there's all making a conjunction with Mars and Scorpio, and I just inadvertently kind of stumbled upon the fact that none other than the great Deepak Chopra, the famous spiritual teacher of our time, has Mercury and Mars in conjunct in Scorpio, and I have recently been going through my parents' collection of old books, and I have found a Deepak Chopra book. It's named the Seven Spiritual Laws of Success, and the thing about this is that as a millennial growing up, there was a period of time when Deepak Chopra was really seemed to there's a general consensus of people not liking him and not taking him seriously, and I would figure that I would at least try to give him a fair chance. But I'm going to give you an example of this. This is something that I have found that in this book that I've been reading of why I think Deepak Chopra is problematic, you could say, or there's a certain issue with this, and it's not. Oftentimes, I think he's misrepresentative as the kind of guy who would just say, wishy-washy, flowery language about energy and vibrations and stuff. Whereas there's more. That's not the problem here. I'm going to read this and going to highlight for you specifically what the issue is. Okay, so I'm going to start here on page 40 of this book. The law of karma says you and I are essentially infinite choice makers. In every moment of our existence, we are in that field of all possibilities where we have access to an infinity of choices. Some of these choices are made consciously, while others are made unconsciously. But the best way to understand and maximize the use of karmic law is to become consciously aware of the choices we make in every moment. Now, so far, so good, I would say. I'm going to keep going. Whether you like it or not, everything that is happening at this moment is a result of the choices you've made in the past. Now, okay, first of all, like, if you just take this one sentence at a time, everything that's happening at this moment is not a result of the choices that specifically I have made in the past. For example, I'm living or like the house where I live was not a house that I didn't pick this house out. It was I was too young of an age at the time to contribute in that choice making, and so I'm basically at this. I mean, and whether or not why we choose to sell this house or whatever, this is something that personally it's not just up to me. This is just a basic example. First thing that comes to my mind. There's a lot of things that go. I mean, when it comes to being a human being, does anybody actually remember making a conscious choice of whether you incarnate as a human or whether you incarnate as an animal? I mean, there's all kinds of millions of things about the way the world works that I mean, there are some choices that you do make, but I don't think. First of all, everything that is happening at this particular moment, um, like what if what if I sneeze? Do I have a choice over that or not? Or if I'm not sneezing, is that because I'm choosing not? I don't know. Using I'm not sneezing. is because I'm choosing not to sneeze right now, or the way that I just shook my head like that, is that me choosing to do involuntary, right? Um, Unfortunately, a lot of us make choices unconsciously, and therefore we don't think they are choices, and yet they are. This idea that even something like sneezing, an involuntary reflex, is actually something that you choose or choose not to do. It's just happening at a level of being unconscious, right? Um, this is I kind of like Alan Watts' approach to this, because he would say that it's completely like there's all these things that are happening, like your heart is pumping blood and you're breathing, and while you could slow down and focus on your breathing, that you don't have to think about blood flowing through your veins, or you don't have to think about all the different functions your body does, because you can just let them function on their own, and you don't have to be trying to control and manage all these little micro functions, right? Um, Now, this is the part that is the most inflammatory, or that I take the issue with. It says, if I were to insult you, you would most likely make the choice of being offended. If I were to pay you a compliment, you would most likely to make the choice of being pleased or flattered. But I think about it, it's still a choice. This is okay. This is what I wanted to get down to, because I feel like I was recording a video yesterday, and I was going with the flow, and I was getting carried down the river of my own train of thought away from this point I wanted to make, which was basically about Mercury being and this whole Mercury and Mars and Scorpio, which you could use this basic idea and see the archetype in the example of Deepak Chopra as the guy who has Mercury, Mars, and also Jupiter in Scorpio as a natal placement, and there being some kind of thing here about Mars being kind of Mars and Scorpio, a place where Mars is strong, and there's something about it's a water sign, so it's emotional, and there's something about the act of attack or defend, and Mars, this military kind of planet, in the emotion, and being personally offended, to be not a physical attack, but a verbal insult, and but with Mercury there being like being able to be cool headed, where you're saying that if somebody is verbally attacking me, if I'm offended by that, that's my choice, right? And that, but similarly, if somebody is trying to flatter me, and if I succumb to that flattery, that's my choice as well, right? But the thing is, I would say I kind of got carried away in what I was saying yesterday, and what I wanted to explain is that in this example, it's very personal, as in your identification with your persona or your character, that you take personally a personal insult versus a personal act of flattery or compliment. But in this day and age, I mean, this kind of shows its date, because I think the whole problem of taking offense to things is that nowadays people could be taking offense to all sort of things in which they don't have any personal investment in, other than having an opinion over what is right or wrong, or what is good or bad, and that there could be all sorts of terribly vulgar and offensive things in the world that do not target us personally. But in also a similar way that in the kind of the young generation uses slang terminology like cringe, and cringe has often been described as not so much cringing for your own sake, but to cringe on another's behalf, right? That somebody else is doing something embarrassing, so that you cringe for the sake of somebody else, right? It's something that you are personally, because the point is, if you have the cringe consciousness, you know that you know better than to put yourself in the firing line. But then when you see other people do it, then you cringe, right? Because you're too self-conscious, you wouldn't even been doing that in the first place. So it's all, you need to have somebody else to cringe at, right? And so this is the whole thing about being offended or being flattered or whatever. To be flattered, it has to be personal, I would say, because you wouldn't be flattered but you wouldn't be vicariously flattered by somebody complimenting somebody else. But if there's certain offense, the world has become a terribly offensive place, basically. There's all kinds of awful, offensive things that we are basically, especially in 2025 and the whole Trump presidency, is just being taken up a notch, right? We're kind of like being asked to just deal with a lot of stuff and not talk about it, not complain about it, because we know about, saying it doesn't seem to do very much to make it, and also the idea of being offended is a very liberal kind of idea, right? Maybe so. But then here it's taken in a very personal way and saying that it's something that you choose. I mean, that you choose to do, and also implying that choosing not to be offended, like, to me this seems kind of dumb, because it seems like being trying to be a stone Buddha, where you see, like, why are you in a situation where people are hurling insults at you in the first place, and to be like, oh well, there's this whole like four agreements thing where it's like nothing's ever personal, it's never about you, it's probably that person's pattern, their dynamic. But it's like, if you have to turn to your Deepak Chopra book to get advice on how to choose not to be defended by being consistently insulted and put down and belittled, or like, you should maybe perhaps ask yourself what is leading you into this situation in the first place, and address, rather than just building up like an iron hide or a tough shell to protect yourself or something like that, right? And there's also this thing where he says, I could offend you and I could insult you, and you could make the choice of not being offended. I could pay you a compliment and you could make the choice of not letting that flatter you either. In other words, most of us, even though we are infinite choice makers, have become bundles of conditioned reflexes that are constantly being triggered by people and circumstances into predictable outcomes of behavior. These conditioned reflexes are like Pavlovian conditioning. Pavlov is famous for demonstrating that if you give a dog something to eat every time you ring a bell, soon the dog begins to salivate when you just ring the bell, because it has associated one stimulus with the other. For most of us, as a result of conditioning, have repetitious and predictable responses to the stimuli in our environment. Our reactions seem to be automatically triggered by people and circumstances, and we forget that these are still choices that we are making in every moment of our existence. We are simply making these choices unconsciously. If you step back for a moment and witness the choices you are making as you make those choices, then in this act of witnessing, you take the whole process from the unconscious realm into the conscious realm. I thought I cropped the other image, but here we go. Whatever. This is an unconscious decision that one image is cropped and the other isn't. But the procedure of conscious choice making and witnessing is very empowering. When you make any choice at all, you can ask yourself two things. First of all, what are the consequences of the choice that I am making? In your heart, you'll immediately know what these are. Now, this is the kind of thing that I sort of take issue with. Well, I mean, in your heart, there's this idea that there's some sort of intuitive grasping of the consequences of your actions. But this is a kind of a loaded assertion, because is it true that we really have that kind of a grasp over the consequences of our actions? But I think this is basically the whole thing about this kind of vibes-based, intuitive, spiritual, where you're navigating life through intuition rather than rational decision making. There's some idea that your intuition is supposed to guide you to the best thing kind of automatically, and you don't have to worry about thinking about it so much. Secondly, will this choice that I'm making now bring happiness to me and to those around me? If the answer is yes, then go ahead with that choice. If the answer is no, if that choice brings distress either to you or to those around you, then don't make that choice. It's as simple as that. Now, as tempted as I am to give a criticism of this, given the current situation that we're in and this year 2025, it seems to be fairly obvious to me that there could be a lot of people in this world whose choices are not aligned with a basic principle of bringing happiness to themselves and those around me or around them, or if that is true, perhaps they have a very isolated and heavily boundaried sense of in-group, out-group dynamics. Because it does seem to be that like a lot of people seem to just be, sadistically taking pleasure in making everybody else suffer around them and being a pain in the ass, and not making choices that make people happy. And it's so maybe if just it's overly simple just to say that like you're supposed to just like intuitively know that one thing's going to make you happy, one thing isn't, or one thing's going to make everybody happy, or one thing isn't, and you're just supposed to like not think about anything and just make the choices that make everybody happy, and then life's simple, right? And then if you can't figure that out, it's just because you overthink things too much, right? Like it promises this sort of thing where you're like, wow, I can just take I was racked my brain making things so complicated, but this just makes life so simple. Then I can just I'm just why won't I'm just gonna be happy. Like if I just stick to this, I'll just be instantly happy all the time. Obviously, right? Because that's what it's all about, anyways, right? To just be so. But anyways, to keep it going here, it says there's only one choice out of the infinity of choices available in every second that will create happiness for you as well as those around you. And when you make that one choice, it will result in a form of behavior that is called spontaneous right action. Spontaneous right action is the right action at the right moment. It is the right response to every situation as it happens. It is the action that nourishes you and everyone else who's influenced by that action. There is a very interesting mechanism that the universe has to help you make spontaneously correct choices. The mechanism has to do with sensations in your body. Your body experiences two kinds of sensations. One is a sensation of comfort, the other is a sensation of discomfort. At the moment you consciously make a choice, pay attention to your body and ask your body, if I make this choice, what happens? If your body sends a message of comfort, that's the right choice. If your body sends a message of discomfort, then it's not the appropriate choice. Now, I would like to stop here and raise a few questions. For example, what about the whole principle of pushing your comfort zone, right? A lot of people say that you do not grow unless you push your comfort zone, but inherently, according to this Deepak Chopra thing, if you're making any choice that feels uncomfortable, you automatically know it's the wrong choice. So everything your choices have to do is whatever makes you without thinking about it. If it triggers a sensation of pleasure or it triggers a sensation of comfort, you do that. And if anything makes it feels you sense a sense of aversion around it, you just don't have to do it, right? And so there could be all sorts of things in life that inherently have inbuilt aversions around it, and that if you basically what he's telling you to do is follow the path of least resistance and just vibe out and do whatever feels good and avoid anything which is uncomfortable. And there's something about this which is that this could lead to a kind of amoral kind of life, right? Like there could be a lot of things that we like. I'll give you an example. Is that like I have to go to my medical clinic today and get an IV done and all this kind of stuff. And I have to admit that there's some issue where the local hospital we've got a lot of hospitals around, but they're apparently having a shortage of people to work in the emergency room, right? And there's a certain, I don't know if I'm the best candidate to be like a emergency room paramedic kind of person, but there's some basic, I can imagine that working that job would be extremely uncomfortable a lot of the time, especially considering the wide range of unpleasant bodily harm of people that would come into the emergency room. I could understand why people would have a high burnout rate and people wouldn't want to do it, right? But still, it should be considered to be a good thing to be that have people work those jobs even though they're uncomfortable. And then there's also things like firefighters and all sorts of, what if you had to send somebody in to like the Fukushima reactor and they were going to be like, we need to like patch up the leaking reactor and you'll get nuclear waste poisoning, but you'll be performing a heroic feat that will make everybody else safe. There's all sorts of things that would be, incredibly uncomfortable. But if your sense of what is good is just limited to whatever an intuitive sensation just feels comfortable and secure and like happy. You might find yourself living a very limited kind of existence, right? And that this is, there's something about this which, although, and then on the other hand, if you also combine this thing where it's like your own, regardless of what the external circumstances with, including whether or not somebody's actually insulting you or like you're getting verbally attacked or mistreated, apparently that lacks objective reality and is only defined by your subjective choice to treat that in a way where you're like, oh, you hurt my feelings, right? That it's like, if you get, this is one thing that I basically, I was coming up to mind for me in Pluto and Aquarius, because Pluto is like the shadow, right? And I have, maybe this is like, I was thinking about this and I was thinking about Aquarius because this is something that like my dad was really into, this idea that like nobody can make you feel bad about yourself, or nobody can make you feel anything. That like if somebody is trying to scare you or intimidate you or piss you off or whatever, any sort of a reaction that you have is your choice to have that reaction, and that you can be like a total master over all your reactions and not react to anything. Wherein it's sort of like there's something about the way that I think that seemed relevant within this political climate, because it seems very much to be, there's a certain kind of emotional politics of trying to trigger people or try to be provocative and try to provoke people at an emotional level. There's something about the same way that like Aristotle said to win an argument you needed both logos and pathos, and there's certain of making the logical argument and making an emotional argument. And there's a lot of like the problem with the modern sophistry of our time is, instead of trying to appeal to rationality, people are trying to make these highly emotionally charged appeals to like win people over or sway their opinion. And this is made precisely by understanding that people have these big emotional buttons, and you're like, well, what if I just kind of poke and prod this button from this angle? Maybe I can get somebody to do. And it feels like they're constantly having people trying to push and poke and provoke and manipulate certain kinds of behavior and certain kind of actions. And there's something about this whole idea of like choice and free will. And if fate and free will, if the world is fated, deterministic place, however you conceive of that, whether this is karma or whether this is like genetic determinism, or you're just you're just a bundle of like electricity and like neurons, and that you get an input, you get an output, that kind of like, what if we are so conditioned that we don't have much free will, we don't have much choice, and that there's some kind of thing where you're constantly being, there's a whole industry now around trying to manipulate people's behavior. There's the economics of behavior, behavioral economics, right? Trying to create incentives to control the masses by incentivizing people to do one thing over the other thing. And this has been part of, even before the internet, even stuff like trying to make coupon books was a form of behavioral economics. Like maybe we can get people to buy all this product by giving a coupon out or something like this, right? Or like having a mail-in rebate, and then you herd everybody in one direction or something like this, right? And so when you're kind of like what it starts to be like this whole thing where you're not supposed to think about it too much. You're just supposed to make the choice which feels comfortable and secure and makes everybody happy. And what if this just so happens that choice tends to mean conformity with what everyone else is doing, and it just feels like, oh, if I'm a sheep, I mean, I hate to use the lion sheep silly metaphor, right? But you could very well be like if there's a herd animal, I feel safe and comfortable just doing what all the other herd animals are doing. I don't know. Maybe this is a coincidence, right? Maybe if all the other, maybe I feel more comfortable in being grouped in with all the other sheep over there rather than being way out on the own where I'd be easily picked off by a predator, right? Like, I don't know if I don't know, I won't want to think about it too much because that reminds me of my mortality, or that reminds me that there may be certain dangers or threats around, but instead I just don't think about it and just be like a pieced out Zen sheep that's just doing what everybody else is doing, and in a state of blissful conformity and unawareness to whatever problems there might be, right? And if you start thinking about the problems, you start feeling anxious, then that's just a sign not to think about things. So you just program yourself so that you don't, all you do is just like bliss out and feel happy all the time. And that if anybody else isn't able to do that, that's just their choice they're making. They're basically making a choice all the time to feel bad because they would rather, like, I don't know, like sometimes there's some, like this, there's a criticism with this too, where it's sort of like if somebody, it's putting all this responsibility on people for their reactions when precisely the problem is that people don't have control over their reactions in the first place, right? Or this idea of the demand to, there's a sort of weird counterintuitive thing about like the demand to be extremely controlled over all your reactions and all your emotions and all your choices and all this, versus the trying to let go of this impulse to control everything and manage everything, right? And it's sort of like there's a sometimes the new age thing can feel a lot more about like trying to control and manage everything, and rather than trying to let go of the concentration of identification around wanting everything to be a certain way, wanting everything to be what your preference is, and this tends to be the preference is I want everything to be the way that makes me feel good, because that's because you're wired to want to feel good and not to feel bad. And so when I'm making my choices to feel good, why aren't I feeling good yet? Okay, so maybe because somebody else is making maybe because I have to live in a world with other people who are not committed to choosing happiness over pain and suffering. So I have to just sit, bask in this sort of like environment, this ambient, the ambience of other people's poor choices, because obviously they haven't learned how to choose happiness over fear, pain, and suffering, right? And then you could basically, everybody who's suffering, you basically blame them for not taking responsibility over their own experience, right? I'm just trying to say that this is why people tend to take have a bad opinion of Deepak Chopra or New Ageism in general. For some people, the message of comfort and discomfort is in the area of the solar plexus, but for most people, it's in the area of the heart. Consciously put your attention in your heart and ask what to do, then wait for the response. I have to admit that over the years, I've been having issues where I do have some sort of physical sensation where I have a lot of difficult. I mean, the thing is not really necessarily anything new, but I often have a certain overload of physical sensations of not just even emotions, but just like painful sensations in the body that I'm just sort of like make life feel consistently uncomfortable and difficult, and I've just learned to bear it. But some people say that this is like you're supposed to be like there's some obvious change that you are supposed to make as an individual to like take this is you're suffering because you have become addicted to feeling like shit and living a shitty life, and you don't know how to choose what feels good over what feels bad, and you don't know how to like take responsibility for your own life. And so then what you do is then you just resent other people, saying instead of me making my own choice, I just have to begrudgingly say that, oh, like I don't have any choice over my circumstance, because if I wanted to, let's say, sell my house and move somewhere else, I don't actually own the house. It's not my power to do that, right? So it's like or whatever. I'm just using that as an example, right? But it's like there's some kind of thing is like the failure to individuate creates a situation where you end up resenting other people because you blame other people for whatever, but you don't maybe not even know. But you're like, this just feels like it sucks. I don't like it. I want something else. I don't know what it is, but then it's like you're like, well, let's just start. Okay, we're gonna stay in the present moment, and you're chewing too loudly. Fuck you. You're making all this noise. You're why are you breathing so loudly? Why are you chewing so loudly? What are you looking at? Why are you looking at me like this? You know, it's like everything. You're just like what? Did you eat my snack? Do we have what? Do we have any beverages in the fridge? The fridge is empty? Fuck. Do I have to be the one who goes to the grocery store again? Fuck. Oh my god. You know, I have to. Like, you want me to go grocery shop? You know. Oh, like this is like sort of the thing is this is like you have to be like, okay, so present moment, what do I have to do? And it's like obviously I'm making all the right choices because I'm a responsible person. It's obviously all the other people who aren't able to take responsibility that are putting their burdens on me and making me suffer because they're just a bunch of fucking weaklings. And we need to basically eliminate the weaklings so that I can be empowered and I can make positive choices for my own life, right? Yeah, yeah. I think so. So this is the mentality of this kind of atomizing new age individualism, which is there's basically like you're supposed to be happy and blissed out all the time, and then if you can't do because you wouldn't choose to be pissed off volitionally. So you're doing your best to choose to be in good vibes and a nice positive headspace. And so that because you wouldn't identify as the one who would choose to be frustrated or angry or afraid or upset, then it must be somebody else trying to manipulate, push your unconscious button, right? Try to manipulate you into feeling something you wouldn't want to feel, and it becomes the sort of like, you know, where do we isolate the target to scapegoat the one who is, because you know, like my life would be sunshine or roses if that fucker didn't steal my snack out of the fridge or something or whatever it is, right? And you have to just like, but you don't really know what it is that is actually the root of the problem. So it's like the problem with this, like this also creates a problem with the present moment thing, is that you're like, it's like you're trying to meditate and you're like, why can't I choose happiness? And there's like, it'll be like the buzzing fly in the room. It's like, oh, it's the fucking fly. That's the thing that's causing me not to go choose happy. Oh my, or it's just like, you're just like the slightest irritation is always just pissing you off. And you're just like, you know, it's my choice not to be angry at that thing over there. But you know, it's probably not actually the thing. It's like the straw that broke the camel's back, right? It's not actually the thing that's making you pissed off. It's that there's this whole buildup there's this whole overloaded. There's too many things to get into of what it could possibly be, and so it's just this kind of like everybody has to deal with this sort of sense of basic like frustration and irritation, and the sense that you're like, oh well, if you feel that way, that's just your fault, because you know, we have, you know, you can choose this or you can choose that or you can choose that, and you know, welcome to free world. You get the freedom to, you have responsibility to take responsibility of your own life, and if you can't be happy with that, then you know, don't blame me. Don't blame what, you know, we're just trying to help you. We're trying to help you self-actualize, reach your dreams. Why would we want to imprison you? Why would we want to make you suffer? We're just all in it to be super happy, positive people, right? And so we have to figure out who's the one making everybody upset, and we have to scapegoat. You know, it's like this is kind of like why it's annoying, or like we're just gonna have to isolate one little thing as a problem and not do that, right? Make a different choice next time. But it's like, it's too much. What I want to say though is that it did help to do some therapy and to have somebody to talk to a therapist, so I'm not just bundling it all up, and that, you know, perhaps by, I don't know, just doing this kind of stuff, it's an attempt to whatever, express some of the ideas I have just in response to these books, or the problem of trying to be a new ager. um or I thought anyways, this whole, it's not a resolved issue, right? It's like there's a sort of archetypal problem, and I thought that this was a good one for Mercury and Mars and Scorpio, because there's a sense of like, how do you deal with hostility, and this sort of like the sense of identity that comes from having to choose, right? To be identified as a choice maker, as responsibility over your emotional reactions. And then that if I make this video, and I could do it in a very like chilled out, quiet, relaxed way, or else I could get really worked up and angry, and is that my choice, or am I just do I just get into the flow of what I'm doing and I get carried away? And then the other thing is that if I do go in a certain direction with it, I mean, if I get too intense, do I have to worry about the vibe police? Do I have to worry about the vibe police, arresting me for vibing out too hard, or for putting the wrong energy or the wrong emotion into what I'm doing, because this is evidence of how sick and deranged I am, right? And so that like I've obviously, there's some sort of limit to what a normal person, a sane person would not choose to behave this way. And this is I'm taking advantage. I'm being exploited by the tech bros, because I don't know any better not to choose to explore my creativity on these platforms that just give infinite hosting to video, and I can't help but to make a fool out of myself trying to read Deepak Chopra. But this is the whole thing. I don't know. I had worked with a meditation teacher who would always do these kind of things where you put your hand on your heart and tell you what to do, or something like that. And I mean, maybe I've made progress over the years, but I need to express myself, I think, or else it feels like there's so much fucking crazy shit in the world, and you're just supposed to be like, oh, we're just going to like pretend it's not happening and just try to act really positive, and then if somebody is in a bad mood, we're going to blame them for not choosing the right emotion. It's just, oh my god, I just had to express this because I'm not saying I know what the right answer is, but perhaps you can see the archetype here with Mercury, Mars, and Scorpio. If you look at Deepak Chopra's chart here, just again to close it off, this is Deepak Chopra's chart. It's an A-rated chart, meaning that we can be fairly certain that this is in the 9th house, which is, for a guy who's a spiritual teacher, having Jupiter, the teaching planet, in the 9th house to do with spirituality. I think this just goes to show you that astrology works, and whatever, it's tropical. This is how I like to do it. Thanks for watching.